Thank you everyone for joining us for this wonderful event with the Utah State Board of Education. My name is Esperanza Reyes, and I'm a Transitioning Associate Director at the Utah Parent Center. And here with us, we are glad to have Leah Voorhees, who's the Assistant Superintendent of Student Support at the Utah State Board of Education, as well as Nate Dearden, who's Student and Family Rights Coordinator at the Utah State Board of Education. I will definitely take questions from families after they've presented their material. So if you are hoping to ask questions, please type them in. We will be reviewing those at the end after we've given Leah an opportunity to present information as we change the phase we're in our state and we explore what that means for our students and our schools as we enter this new phase. So without further ado, I will let Leah Voorhees share her presentation with you, and we will chat right after.
All right, thank you, Esperanza. Can you see my screen now?
Yes, we can see it, Leah.
Okay, I'm going to turn my video off because my bandwidth cannot do two things at the same time. So it'll kick me out if I try to do two things at the same time. Thank you so much, Esperanza and Joey and Parent Center, for inviting Nate and I to come spend some time with you. We really appreciate it. We're excited to be able to talk to families today. We were really lucky. Week before last, we had a meeting with all the special ed directors in the state, and Esperanza joined us for our meeting, and we're really grateful that she could come and talk to special ed directors. So we really appreciate our partnership with the Parent Center. We highly, highly value our partnership and the opportunity that we have to interact with families through the partnership of the Parent Center. So Esperanza asked me to give you a little overview before we answered some questions about this phase of our soft closure. We're about 8 weeks into our soft closure, and the governor has a 4-phase process to bring the economy back online. And just a week and a half ago, as you know, moved us to the moderate risk phase to orange when we were at red. And so Esperanza had some questions about what that means for education and for you in the state. So State Superintendent Sydney Dixon actually shared at board meeting week before last, 2 weeks ago, a 3 phases to recovery presentation. And I'd like to just quickly share that with you to kind of give you an overview for the direction that we're headed. Now, of course, all the decisions that are made related to COVID-19 are not actually made in our office. The state superintendent does not make those decisions. Local superintendents do not make those decisions. Charter directors do not make those decisions. The state and local health departments make those decisions, and that's state statute. So when it comes to health and safety, those decisions are out of our control. Those are decisions that are made at the health department level. Of course, in consultation with the governor, and Superintendent Dixon is a member of the COVID task force. So there are members of the chamber, other individuals on the COVID task force that Lieutenant Governor Cox leads, but it really is, according to state statute, to be the health departments, the state and local health departments that make those decisions. So the information that we're going to share with you today is as much as we have. You may think that's not very definitive, but this is the information that is within our locus of control. So Superintendent Dixon has put together this, and the state board has adopted this 3-phase education plan that goes along with the governor's economy recovery plan. So the first phase is the new now. And Superintendent Dixon has been very clear. If you've seen her on the COVID press conferences and in the afternoons, she's been very clear that this is not the new normal. There is nothing normal about what is going on. And so she refuses to use that term, and she doesn't want any of her staff to use that term because this is not normal. So what we're experiencing right now is the new now. Then we will be moving into, as the school year ends, we will be moving into phase 2, the near future. And then as we get into the green of the governor's recovery plan, we will be moving into the new future. So just quickly, I'd like to go over the key elements of each of these phases. The new now, we at the State Board of Education and superintendents and charter directors are focusing on 5 priorities for helping families and educators and students. And those 5 priorities we've been working on for the past 8 weeks include continuing to provide learning opportunities for all students. The state chose to go to soft closure so that we could continue to provide learning opportunities to students. And that was a decision that, that state leaders and local leaders made in conjunction with the health department because they felt it was best for students. We wanted to prioritize continuing to help seniors graduate, get the credit they needed so that they continue on after high school. Wanted to maximize opportunities for students to continue to receive meals. The number of school breakfasts and lunches, the participation, the percent participation since we went on soft closure 2 months ago has increased dramatically. And our child nutrition program at the State Board of Education has just been working furiously with child nutrition directors and in districts and charter schools around the state to continue to provide meal services for students. It's been a Herculean effort, and it's been really impressive what they have been able to accomplish in coordination with you, with families. Another priority is to make every effort to keep education staff employed. School districts and charter schools have been using staff in creative and alternative ways to be able to keep people employed, keep people working so that we don't further hurt the economy. And then really important, in the last couple months, we've been focusing on supporting student and staff mental health and social emotional needs. As we've been isolated, as we've been at home, as we've been away from our social networks and our connections, staying emotionally connected has been one of the major focuses of this phase of our educational plan, the new now. So as school ends, and now that the state has moved into the moderate phase, and as districts and charter schools are looking at what's next for the state, we're moving into, though we're not there yet, we're moving into phase 2, which is the focus of phase 2 is to bridge learning gaps. So if you've looked at the governor's education plan, the moderate phase allows for a couple students with an adult, with an educator, to be in a school building. School cannot resume. And students in groups cannot return into school buildings, and educators in groups cannot return into school buildings. But health departments have stated that in the moderate phase, that it is okay for a couple, 1 to 3 students, to be in a school building with an educator if proper health and safety precautions are taken. If adults are wearing masks, if all the surfaces are cleaned, all of those precautions. LEAs, which is school districts and charter schools, are working with their local health departments to determine if it is possible and if that is the direction that they are going to move into with the school year closing. And we've heard that some are choosing to consider when the school year ends, beginning to provide some tutoring in one-on-one or small groups, and some are not. And that is the choice of the school district, the charter school, in conjunction with their local health department. So if we look at the direction that we're headed, that is a consideration. And it's a consideration that needs to be considered with the 4 priorities of phase 2, which is, you've seen on the news that that Congress approved CARES Act funding, which is funding to go to education to be able to reimburse school districts and charter schools for expenses related to COVID-19, starting when the president declared an emergency situation on March 13th. And that funding will be available for the next year. So one of the priorities of this next phase is for school districts and charter schools to determine how to use that funding. Another very important part of this phase is to use progress monitoring, formative assessments, benchmark assessments to determine if students have learning gaps as a result of our soft closure. So the assessment phase of this priority. And as I just said, provide opportunities for possible small group and individual tutoring instruction. And like I said, this is based on the charter school and school districts consultation with the local health departments. Some are feeling like they are going to be able to accomplish that, and some are not. And then the 4th priority is to develop and implement digital opportunities for review and catch up. So continue to provide educational opportunities for students so that they can catch up if there are gaps, and they can review and be prepared for the new school year if they do not have gaps. So that will move us into phase 3, which is the return to schools, return and recover phase. So this is what we expect to happen in the fall if we move into the green, if we're able to move into green with the state and local health departments approval. And so we will be again using assessments at the beginning of the school year when we get there to assess learning gaps of classes, of schools, of entire school districts and charter schools, and set that as baseline for the instruction that we need to provide next year. So this is going to be a very important priority when we're able to return to school buildings. The next one is providing opportunities for small group and individual support for those students who have been identified to have gaps, to continue to provide supplemental tutoring and instruction for those individual students or small groups of students. And then a really important thing is we've learned all sorts of new skills as a result of this soft closure. Yes, it's been frustrating. Yes, you saw when my camera is on, I am broadcasting from my closet. Just like many of you, your students are doing their lessons in the kitchen and in their bedrooms, and we have learned how to use digital platforms. We've learned how to provide online teletherapies. We've learned a lot of really cool lessons. We've learned how to do art projects online, sculpture projects, and we want to take that learning and apply it next year so that we don't lose everything that we have gained as a result of this experience. So that's another priority of our next phase when we return to school. So the other thing that we really want you to know is we have resources available. We've been working furiously at the state board and with our national partners, with other states, with other states' special ed directors, with national TA centers. I know the Parent Center Network. We've all been working together to put resources together for parents and for educators. At the State Board of Education, we have an entire website dedicated to coronavirus. There's tabs for families, there's tabs with federal guidance, there's tabs with state guidance, there's information that's available for individuals for whom English is a second language. We have tons of resources. Right when you open the USBE's website, right across the top, you can see our coronavirus website and click on that and find all the tabs. And then another wonderful resource that we have in Utah, which is so far ahead of almost all other states in the nation. We already had, before the soft closure, for years and years, we've had the Utah Education Technology Network, UETN. And the UETN has a Learn at Home platform with resources for children from preschool through post-high. And we're very lucky in Utah that this is available not just to educators, but there's all sorts of parent resources available as well. So we wanted to make sure that you had this information and have access to this information, so that in your spare time, because we know you have tons of it right now, we know you don't, but if you need a resource, that you would know where to go to get it. So we are really grateful to the Parent Center for providing this information, or this opportunity for us to spend a little bit of time with you, and are now happy to turn it back over to Esperanza.
Thank you so much for sharing that information, Leah. That is much appreciated. That's quite a thoughtful plan that the State Board has outlined for the different phases. So thanks again for the partnership and for clarifying for our families. We do have a couple of comments that have been made. The first one is, schools be assessing all students, or do we need to ask for that?
So I'll let Leah join in if I don't give correct answers, but it's my understanding that generally they would be doing assessments of all students, because all students missed instruction. And as you saw in those slides, as we're trying to plan what to do, as we're planning different return and recover type services, they will be assessing all students. So I don't think it's something that you're going to need to ask for separately. And when I say assessing, that's in the general term of education, general ed type setting, not like a special ed evaluation or a special ed assessment, just to clarify.
Okay, thank you, Nate. The next comment, my kids are having such a hard time and the school isn't being flexible, they're being very strict. It is getting harder to get my kid in front of the screen to do work. And that's more a comment than a question. So any thoughtful suggestions on that?
Well, I mean, what I can share is Leah shared an experience with us that happened in a school district where we had a student who was just having a lot of behavioral challenges at home and not really engaging with the content or instruction. And that parent she reached out to the teacher, and the teacher communicated with parent, and they kind of came up with a plan so that parent could learn some of the behavior strategies teacher used at school to help the student engage. And the parent felt like that was a very helpful process, because just brainstorming and implementing some of those things, she felt that her students' behavior improved. So I think just like any behavior challenges we're seeing, there are different reasons for why your student could be not engaging. And I think it's totally appropriate to reach out to an educator and have some brainstorming and see if either we can set up a little reinforcement system or what's keeping the student from wanting to engage. And I just think with a lot of challenges like this, 2 or 3 heads are better than one. But know that you're not alone. We're hearing this about a lot of students. So your student is not, you know, just different than the rest. A lot, I think, are kind of feeling fatigue with engaging with online services. We're at the end of the school year, so.
Yeah, along the same vein, a parent wrote, videos are glitchy, we can't do his therapy. So there's, you know, some expression here on frustration when things are not quite working out. What can I do for my children? I've sent emails. Perhaps they're not being receptive to less work. So again, additional comments about how difficult it can be on that, at that individualized level for each family. And here's an additional question. Nate, what would an appropriate assessment look like?
So my background is I'm an attorney. I'm not a teacher or an administrator, but what I would say is it depends what an appropriate assessment would look like. But my answer would be it would be aligned with the content, the grade level core standards, because what we're trying to do is kind of assess where those gaps in information are and what we may need to fill because of things that were missed. So I think, as Leah described, like a formative assessment or a benchmark assessment, not all of those are like a standardized test, fill in the circle. They're very much kind of designed to get to what the student understands about different concepts taught connected to the core. But Leah might have something to add with that question. I don't know.
Yeah, I'll just add a little bit that the every school district and charter school has an assessment director. And like we have special ed directors, and the assessment directors have been meeting and putting together plans to provide assessments to students, like Nate was saying, formative assessments, which mean along the instruction. Formative means during instruction, as opposed to a summative assessment, which is at the end of instruction. So they're providing, they're putting plans together to look at progress monitoring, what progress are students making and not. Benchmark assessments is.
You froze, Leah. She was able to turn off her camera and she could come back. This is
as far as instruction occurs.
Okay, well, while she rejoins us, we'll just move on to some additional comments. There's a parent that is wondering about related services and what those could look like, and also a question about pre-recorded lessons versus live ones.
So when you say the related services piece, are you speaking about this one? How does soft closure affect minutes with OT and speech and stuff? Okay, so I think the challenge is that this came upon us and everyone's been trying to work with the systems that they have. And so just as schools went into soft closure and we were looking at guidance from the Department of Ed and national experts, different attorneys, the advice was to not change IEPs because IEPs should be based on student needs, and the closing and services being changed was not based on student needs. It was based on health and safety concerns. And so the idea was to implement as much as a school possibly could. So you've seen that some students have continued to receive related services like Leah talked about through telehealth or teletype services. That said, if your child does not receive those services, that is when we return in the fall, when there will be some conversation that can be started by you, but also should be started by other members of the IEP team through the school to discuss what we call compensatory services or makeup services. And so students should be receiving as much of these different types of related services that we can, but for example, sometimes with OT that involves somebody working directly one-on-one physically with the student, and that may not be something that can happen right now. And so similar as we're discussing just assessing all kids generally to see where they're at, it will involve some assessment, again, like Leah said, with progress monitoring. And if that student is in need of some services to make up what they didn't receive, then that will be a conversation and a decision that you would make with the rest of the team.
Thank you, Nate. There was a parent that was wondering about response to intervention, RTI supports. It sounds like RTI will be crucial when students can attend school again. What are your thoughts?
I agree with you with this parent. So yeah, I think that I have heard from some school districts that they are doing RTI as part of their summer school programming. Not everybody's doing that, and that's okay. But yes, I mean, I guess my argument would be response to intervention should always be crucial for our students, because it's this idea that we're really looking at reasons for why they may be struggling or behind. And so one of those things that you try to parse out with response to intervention is, was it a lack of appropriate instruction? And right now, many of our students have not received as much instruction as they generally would. And so as we use those concepts and practices related to RTI, we would see many students continue to make progress as they received that appropriate instruction. Others, if they are struggling and not making expected levels of progress with interventions, that would tune us into providing more supports. So yeah, I think it's definitely a crucial thing. But I think many LEAs have been doing that and should be continuing to do that in the fall.
Thank you, Nate. There was a parent that was wondering if there has been any thought about any plan for students that might be higher risk, where perhaps the schools are open again, the students return, but the family's not feeling comfortable with the level of risk at that point in time. And I know this is very hypothetical, but has that come up at all?
We haven't discussed it a ton, but it has come up a little bit. I think I've seen some things just even in the news about different states and considerations that are coming up. I think my answer somewhat will be from a SPED lens right now, not just for all students. I mean, the idea is that students with IEPs have a placement. And that is the level of supports and services, and we take into consideration all of these things that they may need. So depending on a student's health needs, there are times when a placement may be home instruction because that is the most appropriate setting for them to receive services and supports. That said, there, as Esperanza pointed out, there's a lot of unknowns right now. So previously, up until now, we have general kind of home and hospital services for any students, but those are fairly minimal. And so I am guessing and betting that there will be some look at this in the near future, because I know some parents may not be comfortable having their students return. What I will say too is that in Utah, we are lucky in that there are many options in terms of parent choice and how students can interact with the school system. So there are things like dual enrollment, where a student can be homeschooled for part of the day and participate in public school for part of the day. There's also split enrollment, where you could do some enrollment with a virtual charter and then enrollment with a district or charter. So I do think, but I think this will be a continued conversation because there are still a lot of unknowns about the fall and what that's going to look like for all students.
Thank you. One parent asks, as many schools may have only one mental health worker or share with other campuses, are there going to be any additional mental health supports associated with everything we've experienced?
That's a really good question, and I've seen a lot of guidance from national experts encouraging schools and to work on this area. I think it will depend. As Leah talked about, districts and charters can access CARES funds to provide additional services to their students and families. And for example, we had a meeting with Superintendent Dixon yesterday with leadership, and we did a survey where we asked districts and charters across the state how they plan to use funds, and some indicated that they would look to build their mental health supports within their settings. So it really depends on kind of the plan that the LEA comes up with in terms of how they want to spend their funds, but that is one of the allowable uses of CARES Act funding.
Thank you for that. Another parent asks, is there going to be summer school or programs?
So again, that's dependent on your district or charter. So I know that some have chosen to do that, some have not, and I think there are differing reasons. I think right now a lot of administrators are giving us feedback that a lot of teachers are parents as well, and they're burned out because they've been adapting to this virtual school setting as well as teaching and their kids, and they would like a break. So I think that some districts and charters have had a hard time maybe identifying staff who would be able to work during the summer, but I think many are. It just depends. It's a local decision. It's not a decision that we can make. So we've encouraged folks to use funding as appropriate to meet the needs of their districts and charters. Oh, Esperanza disappeared.
I'm here for you.
I feel for that parent who said that their related services were glitchy, because all of our meetings all day long are glitchy too. I get kicked out of about half of the meetings that I have every single day. So we totally feel for you.
All right, let's ask another question and let me know if it has already been asked. We have Amanda asking, with it being highly likely that our students have fallen behind academically, even more so, what guidance is being given to districts to ensure that this does not negatively impact their current access or rights to a meaningfully inclusive education with their gen ed peers?
Well, that's a good question. There's a lot to unpack there. I think for all of our students, what we would envision, and when we think about just some of the extra services that may be given in the future to make up for what has happened now, things like compensatory services that I talked about, those are in addition to the school day. And some parents could choose to waive them if they felt like it was too much. But a reason why the law says those need to happen outside of the regular school day is because we don't want to turn to a model where we remove a lot of kids from their current setting and from their peers in a more inclusive setting to get makeup services. And so I think when you look at nationally what's happened, Secretary of Education DeVos, she has not granted many waivers to the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act. So that means we are still striving to implement IEPs as written. We are still encouraging students to be in the least restrictive environment or the gen ed classroom as much as possible. So I'm not sure if that totally answered your question, but I think the idea is that we definitely don't want to move kids out of inclusive settings so that they can get extra help if we can do it in a different way.
Before we continue to another question, I just wanted to say some of these situations are highly individualized to your child. If you have a situation where you'd like to consult with a parent consultant of the Utah Parent Center, maybe speak more about how it applies to your child in particular, I highly encourage you to give us a call, contact us via email, and we'd be happy to have a more individualized response where we can support you with information. So we'll continue to hear the questions, but just keep that in mind. Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. They can also direct message us on Facebook and we'll connect with them and make sure they get in contact with a parent consultant who can help them. We also have Pamela, and I think you may have gone over this question. Is there going to be summer school or programs?
Yeah, I think somebody else might have asked that as well. So it's really dependent on the charter or the district's decision of what they want to do in terms of summer programming. That said, some of you are probably familiar with the term extended school year, or ESY, and that is a determination that an IEP team will make that some students may receive those services during a break in school or a break in instruction if certain qualifications are in place. And so if your student has received extended school year in the past, you may be a little more familiar with that, and that is something that districts and charters should be providing if a student needs that to receive a free appropriate public education.
Great, thank you. We've got a lot of similar questions of people asking, do we really have to wait until fall? I think you've really spoken to that, and we will repost this video so that they can watch it in full again. We do have a different question. For students who are reaching the age of 22, will consideration be made for those students who may need extra support and makeup time, or will the age of 22 cutoff be firm? I think she's speaking about special education services and that transition period.
Yeah, so I can't definitively answer this, but what I would say is that, again, if students have not received some of the services they were entitled to prior to turning 22, I think that's a compensatory education discussion that needs to happen within the IEP team. So in terms of federal funding, that is firm. As I said, Secretary DeVos has not waived many things, and that was not one of them. But that said, what I would hope is that it would look like an IEP team decision, and there could be a plan for some services to go past 22 if it was appropriate, and if the student needed it to receive a free appropriate public education. So that is kind of an individualized one, but if you have further questions, you could reach out to us, and we have some colleagues who work with that age group, especially transition aged youth, and I think there will be some considerations given to that. So
thank you. We also have a question about some of the technology that has been given to them. Jeffrey says, there are some programs like Prodigy, Imagine Learning, Alex, etc. that have been helpful during this period of time. Will those still be available during the summer?
And I don't know the answer to that. What I would encourage you to do is reach out to your school's administration and ask. And I would say that probably some of them are, but I'm not sure. It probably depends on licensing agreements and things like that. But I think along those lines, as Leah talked about, there's things that we've learned from this, and I think it's very helpful for your school administrators to hear from you about which of these different programs or methods were useful and helpful to you as a parent and working with your student, because I am guessing, as we all are, that we're going to be doing more things virtually moving forward. And so I think that's some really helpful feedback, but direct those questions to your school administrators.
Thank you. Again, I don't know if we have a specific answer for this at this time, but Erin asks, parents are currently providing many of the services needed for students to make progress on their IEP goals. Will parents be compensated for the services they are providing so that students meet their IEP goals?
So it's not my understanding that parents will be compensated for what they've been providing and working for their students. So it's, again, as we talk about, if students have not been receiving the services in terms of what's encompassed on their IEP, that will be a conversation in the fall with schools to determine makeup services. And so even though a parent wouldn't be compensated for services they've been providing their student, technically those aren't services under the IDA. The school will still need to have a conversation with the IEP team about whether the student needs special education and related services that were not provided.
Thank you. Again, I'll just say that we will repost this video so that you can rewatch it and really listen to all the answers that Nate and Leah have given us. We'll ask just one more question. We are running out of time. I have a parent, Mary, and she says, my kids will not keep masks on or even wear them. How do they plan to handle special education classes in the fall?
That is a good question, and I think there will be considerations about that. I know, for example, just kids in my own family, there's sensory issues, or just even the hand washing and not touching each other's things is difficult. We are aware that schools are an area where there's high risk just because of things like this. And so we can't completely answer, I can't completely answer that right now, but I think that we will continue to just try to problem solve and work together. I think right now we are not completely sure what return in the school means, and so there may be some instances where kids will just be in smaller groups and kind of practice social distancing, and masks may not be a possibility for some of our students with disabilities because of just different challenges. So I think we're going to have to wait and see approach, and I know that we're all a little tired of that answer, but what I've learned from this and what I've enjoyed in talking with parents and educators just throughout my career is that you as parents are so great at brainstorming and problem solving and being flexible. And we're just gonna have to keep doing that. So I think that's the strength that we have as parents of kids with disabilities and as special educators, because all the time we're adjusting to new circumstances. So I know that's not where we all want to be right now, but I would say just continue to communicate your concerns and continue to encourage people to come to the table with an idea of, let's not just focus on the barriers, but let's look at the root cause of what we're concerned about and come up with some different flexible options. And just like this whole thing has forced us to do, look at things differently and problem solve together.
Thank you so much, Nate and Leah and Esperanza. This has been so helpful for us parents, and we are grateful for the hard work you're doing. We know that you're problem solving and working as hard as we are, that we're all in a really similar situation. So again, thank you for your time. Feel free to reach out to the Utah Parent Center, info@utahparentcenter.org. You can just send us an email. You can direct message us on Facebook or give us a call. Our phone number is 801-272-1051. We're here to help statewide, make sure that you understand what your rights are as parents, what's going on with the schools. Again, we thank you so much for USBE sending Nate and Leah a little bit of time to hang out with us and answer some of our parents' questions.
They are incredible sources of knowledge, so thank you. Thank you both.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Take care. Be healthy and safe, everybody.